Hello, this is Cristina Mattiello again. I will be with you now for Unit 2, which is divided into two parts, inclusive education and ageism and intergenerational integration. Now I'm going to share with you my PowerPoint. Sorry. Here we are. This is slide 2. And you can find, as usual, a detailed index with the titles of each slide. That makes it easy for you to find specific topics. Inclusive education will be seen in different aspects, from language to religion, while ageism means discrimination of all persons, but also of young ones. And then you have a final bibliography in slide 30. Part 1, Inclusive Education. I'm quoting from the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. We have already seen it in Unit 1 for migrants' rights. It also includes some statements about education. Everyone has the right to education. Education shall be free, at least in the elementary and fundamental stages. This is Article 26. It is remarkable that socio-economic obstacles to education are soon underlined. We can already say that removing this is the first necessary step to guarantee a global access to education. Slide 4, educational poverty. This is the reason why I wanted to start with the topic of educational poverty. Lack of access to fundamental educational opportunities, which prevents children and teenagers from learning, developing their capabilities, and achieving their potential. This is the official definition of educational poverty. Approximately 250 million children and young people are out of school globally, with poverty being a major contributing factor to this crisis. The educational poverty definition we have read was written by Save the Children, an ONG committed by many people to the care of minors in different fields. Europe is not free from this dramatic problem. Children across Europe tell what poverty means for them. It's going to school on an empty stomach, being stressed because parents can't pay the rent, spending winter in cold homes and schools, not having enough money to buy a book, and not daring to have hopes and dreams, no expectations for their lives. But no European country is free from child poverty. More than 26 million children are at risk of poverty, of social exclusion. Together, these children would make the seventh most populous country in the European Union. This is how a girl from Spain explained the problem to Save the Children operators. These are her words. My father is unemployed because the factory closed. My mother is at home, but she's looking for a job. If my parents say no, I know it's for a reason. My parents want us to be happy. If they say no, it's because they have no money. I understand. So there is an intergenerational transmission of disadvantage, which is unfair and costly for both individuals and society as a whole. It is a cycle which can't stop. Slide 5. How to face educational poverty. According to United Nations data, 64 million school-age children are globally still excluded from the education system. It is a huge number, which states the strong disequalities our world is based on. The Agenda 2030, we saw in the first unit, has inclusive and equitable quality education and learning possibilities for all in its goal number 4. But to do this, we need to remove poverty and inequalities. So poverty and education are strictly connected in any improving program. In order to eradicate child poverty, social exclusion, and educational poverty, European states and institutions should take all inequality of opportunities in childhood by removing the barriers that prevent children developing skills and capabilities. I think that we do not undervalue the problem of school material. If children go to school without all they need to follow the lessons and study properly, they will never be able to fill the gap, which will be evident from the first day. Another problem is teachers' attitudes toward disadvantaged students in their classes. If they are not really motivated and if they do not intimately believe that those students can do well, any program will be unsuccessful. In Africa, I saw a missionary sister talking to children living at subsistence levels in a very isolated area, a rural area, asking them about their wish for their future. And when they said they wanted to become doctors or teachers and so on, she would strongly encourage them. This, I think, it doesn't happen here in Europe. Inclusive education. Inclusive education is somehow very simple to define. All children in the same classrooms. And I'm talking about disability too. All children in the same classrooms, no special classes, which are only marginalizing ghettos by which society keep problems away from the so-called good students. Inclusive education is a key strategy to ensure that all children benefit from quality education to develop their skills and realize their full potential. Inclusive education is more than just a teaching method. It is a way of thinking that values the unique differences every child brings to the classes. This approach ensures that all children, regardless of their physical, intellectual, emotional, or social needs, are given the same opportunities to learn, grow, and thrive in a supportive and shared learning environment. Inclusiveness in education involves all aspects of the education system that can facilitate equality in having meaningful and successful participation in those systems themselves. Slide 7. Principle of inclusive education. To point out the principles of inclusive education, I referred to a very important teacher movement in Italy, MCE, the Educational Cooperation Movement. You can read their guideline. Here, I'd like to shortly talk to you about this movement. The Educational Cooperation Movement is a grassroots educational movement born in 1951 in Italy around the teacher Anna Marcucci Fantini. It includes teachers, pedagogists, and training operators who are inspired by and share the methodology of popular pedagogy by Célestin Freinet, a French teacher of mid-20th century. MCE has always been committed and continues to be committed to the renewal of teaching, the affirmation of a popular pedagogy, and the construction of an increasingly public, secular, and democratic school system. It aims to enrich the human and professional skills of teachers and the full development of the personalities of students of all social backgrounds, through cooperative and socially inclusive action research activities. Today, its focus is obviously especially on educational inclusion in a society that has already become effective multi-ethnic. Let's read its principles together: equal rights, opportunities, equity, openness, respect, and valorization of diversities, freedom of speech and expression, democratic participation. To aid to democracy with democracy. Slide 8, inclusive education as a social strategy. From what we have already said, it is clear that a real inclusive education is necessarily also a social strategy. Inclusive education involves the process of strengthening conditions and capacities of education systems so that they can approach to all children, regardless of sex, ethnicity, language, socioeconomic status, nationality, area of residence, and disability status, among other characteristics. It necessarily involves institutions and communities because it promotes social structural changes aimed at building new contexts where all can have equal rights and feel welcomed. Inclusive education acts as a social strategy because it promotes equality, social justice, and a sense of community through a system that educates all students, regardless of their differences, in the same environment. It fosters acceptance and respect for diversity, builds social skills for all students, and helps dismantle discriminatory attitudes, thereby preparing everyone for a more inclusive society. Slide 9 talks about the right to education. We have already seen it, of course, but here I want to stress that rights are strictly interconnected to one another. If we work to promote and apply one of them, that is good also for other rights. So the right to education, according to UNICEF, United Nations International Children's Emergency Fund, is this: all human rights are interlinked, and this includes the right to education. It is not possible to achieve an effective education unless other rights are realized. And if the right to education is fulfilled, it leads to the realization of other rights. So it requires non-discrimination, best interests of the children, right of the children to be heard, protection from violence and abuse, an opportunity for life within the community, and promotes participation in public life, exercise of legal capacity, work and employment, and adequate standard of living, a global social context and concept. Inclusive education, in fact, involves transforming the whole education system. Governments should think about it alongside other children's rights, because it cannot be introduced in isolation. Slide 10. Here I'd like to stress again the importance of correct terminology. Here I'm comparing the concept of multiculturalism and the concept of interculturalism. Multiculturalism is the passive coexistence of multiple cultures, which may exist side by side with little interaction. In contrast, interculturalism is an active approach, a dynamic approach that promotes dialogue, interaction, and mutual exchange between different cultures to create new shared experiences and understanding. The key difference is that multiculturalism focuses on a society where different cultures exist separately, while interculturalism aims and focus on how those cultures connect and change through interaction. Interculturalism wants to create a more cohesive society through mutual learning, the exchange of ideas, and the development of shared experiences. A society where individuals learn from one another leads to a more integrated and understanding community. It recognizes that diversity is a resource for social change and development. So intercultural education in this context aims to go beyond passive coexistence to achieve a developing and sustainable way of living together in multicultural society through the creation of understanding of, respect for, and dialogue between the different cultural groups. Here we're going to see intercultural education again in other aspects. It is the education system which must adapt to meet the needs of students and not the other way around. This, I think, is very important to know and to reflect about for us teachers. This is why intercultural education concerns the learning environment as a whole in all its dimensions. It needs to concern the learning environment as a whole, as well as other dimensions of educational processes, such as school life and decision making, teacher education and training, curricula, languages of instruction, teaching methods, and student-student interactions and learning materials. So teachers and educators must be very motivated and have special competencies and attitudes. In particular, I'd like to point out the first and the last one in the list you can see. Intercultural attitudes like openness, curiosity, readiness. It means that they must be willing to interrelate with students and pupils from other cultures because they think that they will enrich their knowledge and also their human experience. They must be intimate, convinced of this. And the last one, the last point, critical cultural awareness. It means that teachers must not have a Eurocentric view. It means they have to decolonize their approach to other culture. Intercultural education sees diversity as a resource for social change and positive development of all. Slide 13. Sorry, slide 12. Here we find the aims of the intercultural education expressed in a very synthetic way, which I think could be useful for our students too. As you see, what is stressed here is the concept of being all equal, mutual understanding and respect, peer-to-peer communications dialogue, shared experiences. All this should lead to the growing of an active citizenship conscience. Let's read all these points together. Once again, mutual understanding, peer-to-peer relationships between different cultural groups, awareness and respect for other cultures and perspectives, intercultural communication skills. And the society we want to build is a society where social and cultural conflicts can be solved peacefully, diversity can coexist in a harmonious way, inequalities and prejudice can be seen, but also contrast. Dialogue and shared experiences are promoted and common in daily life. Individuals are prepared and motivated for active citizenship. Active citizenship in a solidarity perspective, of course. Slide 13, we focus on a crucial problem in intercultural education, language. Language means a whole culture we have within us. So we must be very cautious. We must not create strict hierarchies in which the language of the minority groups are annihilated. Of course, practically in the daily life, all the majority language prevails. But just because of this, a real intercultural education have to include other languages at school in a perspective of respect for all of them. Every language conveys and is a vehicle for culture. And so language education is the key for mutual respect. Let's look at the table. The learner and the languages present in school, languages of schooling, foreign languages, modern and classical, regional minority and migration languages, language as a subject, languages in other subjects, curricula and evaluation. This is a platform of resources and references for plurilingual and intercultural education. We all can see it and reflect upon it. And the European Centre for Language, ECML, Council of Europe, promotes quality language education in Europe. I do suggest you to look at their website. Here you can see some suggestions for plurilingual education. The European Centre for Language, whose headquarters are in Graz, Austria, was founded in 1914. And its aim is the implementation, I'm quoting, of language policies and the promotion of innovative approaches to the learning and teaching of modern languages. It cooperates with the European Commission and several professional educational works and networks. I put the ECML website address here. Slide 14, another crucial aspect of multicultural societies, religion. An intercultural approach rejects the political use of religions as incitement to war and violence. On the contrary, it sees religions as an instrument for dialogue and peace. What is enlightened is the common spiritual basis of the different faiths, which is the basis of a deep interreligious dialogue. Once again, we must stress that all religions have their dignity, which must be respected. People of different religions must share experiences, work together in a peer-to-peer condition in order to build a new, really pluralistic community together. A very important point is that no religion is violent itself. Sacred texts can be read in different ways in all religions. All religions can be used by political powers in a violent way to create oppressive regimes, or even they can be used by extremists and terrorists. But they also have widespread and majority nonviolent expressions we have to focus on, of course. Students with different religions should be encouraged to share their own experiences with others in order to valorize them. They have to be encouraged to help the others to get to know it and their culture in general from their direct personal experiences. Because diversity always enriches all. Slide 15. Here I put the references for suggestions for intercultural learning classroom activities. A toolbox with many examples of possible activities. Here, some other examples from the toolbox. In the slide, you can see traditional cooking and outside educational activities. They are all suggested by this site, Intercultural Learning EU. I read some examples. 2 visions for 1 reality. 60 seconds is 1 minute, or does it? A jolt reality. It's like a shake reality, a mix. Can you trade value? Another, change your glasses, 1. Drawing with 2 hands. Greeting rituals. Let's go together. My history. Responding to racism. The global village. The iceberg of culture. The map is not the territory. Traffic in nature. What is stereotype and prejudice? Who are I? This is interesting. Who are I? A plural I for a plural society. Slide 15. Also stresses the importance of outside educational activities because the relationship with territories and areas, contexts in which schools are, is always very, very important. Sharing recreational activities, showing movies and music coming from different cultural contexts is an excellent way to build a positive approach to otherness and can involve the external community too. Now, in slide 16, we see open classes and laboratories. There are some beautiful, I think, didactical materials elaborated by the Movement for Cooperative Education, MCE, about lab activities. Open classes and laboratories activities are its privileged teaching contexts because they stimulate a really collaborative work, which helps also weaker students to find the way to express their potentialities. They also induce a sense of responsibility and awareness, which implements self-conditions and confidence and promotes autonomy. And this beautiful concept of a learning community, because also teachers and educators are active part of the educational process. They learn beyond teaching. The whole groups become learning communities. But I'd like to share with you what they say about the laboratory, because I find it really very, very beautiful. The laboratory is a teaching format that creates a powerfully educational and formative environment. It implements processes that focus on the learner who, by doing, manipulating knowledge, contact objects, becomes aware of the connections between various disciplinary fields, produces analysis, reflection, and reworks knowledge. It's the place where can be reconstructed the meaning and decoded the specific languages with which nature and culture speak to us. We are the deposits of collective memory that characterize the historical environmental identity of a territory, and the people who inhabit it can be shared and valorized. So it is a place of cognitive apprenticeship, where students, supported by adults, acquire knowledge and develop responsibility and awareness, gradually gaining autonomy over their own learning. In this way, even the weakest students are challenged and gradually test their self-efficacy, and they are not marginalized or excluded. This is the most important point. Slide 17. Evaluation is an aspect of didactics on which MCE, the Movement for Cooperative Education, has worked deeply and very much. Evaluation, in fact, tends to be very normative, normalizing, and therefore penalizing for diversities, and it goes against the MCE principles of education. So MCE elaborated the concept of formative evaluation, an evaluation in progress, which monitors the educational process to guide it in the best way possible. An evaluation not meritocratic, which rejects grades and any acts which can discriminate. All the students are considered for what they have achieved on the basis of their starting points, for how they could improve their abilities. Evaluation of the activities addresses not the activities, but the impact of activities on participants. That is what is evaluated. Formative evaluation promotes metacognitive reflection, which means that the process of evaluation itself reflects on itself as well. Self-assessment practices are strongly encouraged in order to develop self-regulation skills. In slide 18, we see how we can deal with intercultural education in traumatic contexts. Over 473 million children, more than 1 in 6 children globally. This is the terrible number of children living in war areas and therefore seriously traumatized. Education in this context must challenge great difficulties. Of course, first of all the basic needs of the children should be satisfied. Then, education has to be very much adapted to the specific situations and even to specific children. Its aim is to contrast the idea that there is only violence around us. It must try to restore an idea of positive life and help children to deal with traumatic memories. It must involve families and communities and strengthen children's ability to face difficulties. Here we have part 2, ageism and intergenerational integration. Ageism is of racism or sexism, all the other isms. This quotation shows that ageism does exist, although few talk about it. It does exist like all the other discriminations. First of all, a definition. World Health Organization, so the United Nations again is our source. Ageism refers to the stereotypes, how we think, prejudice, how we feel, and discrimination, how we act towards others or oneself based on age. Ageism exists when age is used to categorize individuals and create social divisions, with ensuring injustice and harm and lack of solidarity across generations. It is the kind of discrimination we less often hear about, and it also lacks research, data, and analysis. It is not included even in the United Nations Declaration of Human Rights. But we must understand that it really affects our daily life, even if we don't see it. The term ageism was created by psychiatrist Butler in 1969. He was the founder of the National Institute on Aging. And he pointed out three factors: negative attitudes towards old people and their age, discriminatory practices against them, and institutional practices and policies that work in the basis of stereotypes and reinforce them. We must begin to see that ageism is everywhere, in individuals' attitudes, institutional and politics practices, as well as in the media and even in the relation to ourselves. Slide 21, spread of ageism. Ageism is much more spread than we can imagine. Again, the problem is that often we do not recognize it as such. But the data are striking. According to the first global United Nations report on ageism, globally 1 in 2 people are ageist against older people. Worldwide, 1 billion people over 60 people, a number which will increase. And in Europe, the problem is very strong too, because 1 in 3 people, both young and old, reports having been a target of ageism, a phenomenon more pervasive than racism and sexism in this region. We couldn't imagine that, I think. And younger people too report more perceived age discrimination than other age groups. Discrimination can be traced in every field of social life. It is especially serious and widespread in the health system, where rationing on the basis of age is unfortunately widespread. Older and younger adults are often disadvantaged in workplaces too. That's another context where ageism is particularly strong, workplaces. But we also have to say that ageism shapes how statistics and data on which policies are based are collected. So data themselves are sometimes undervaluating the problem because they just don't consider this. In slide 22, we see the effects of ageism. Ageism, says the United Nations Population Fund, ageism robs millions of people in Europe of opportunities to feel their potential. So ageism is worse than other factors in economics too, like all discriminations. They are not only immoral and unjust, they are also negative from a socio-economic point of view. Ageism has serious and far-reaching effects on many spheres. It produces social isolation and loneliness, and often induces poverty. It affects health and well-being because causes shorter lifespan, poor physical and mental outcome, limitations in functionality, slower recovery from disability and cognitive decline, and health organizations on a global scale state that 6.3 million cases of depression can be referred to ageism. It also has social and psychological consequences because it reduces older people's quality life, increases their social isolation and loneliness. And so it undermines social cohesion in general, causes intergenerational tensions, obstacles, adaptation to demographic changes, and so reduces the potentialities of all age individuals. Economic consequences because ageism contributes to poverty and financial insecurity of a whole sector of the population. And this is a case, as we have already seen, of intersectionality, which creates a very bad cycle. Ageism can also be expressed in a violent form. Young people, especially young people with social psychological disease, sometimes even bully old people. Ageism intersects with other forms of stereotypes, prejudices, and discrimination, like ableism, sexism, racism, and poverty. And these multiple intersecting forms increase disadvantage and make the effects of ageism even worse and violent. In slide 23, we could hear for some old people themselves their stories of discrimination. I'd like to say that we're not talking about physical violence here, but even if this kind of discrimination can seem not to be a serious problem, we can see that it affected strongly those persons. Some remarks and bad jokes can hurt deeply already fragile persons and often induce loss of self-confidence and depression. First, we have a woman who, according to her daughter, shouldn't buy the dress she would like to have. Let me suggest something more appropriate for you. What on earth? Whose decision should be anyway? Am I not entitled to my own opinion on what I want to wear? I know what I like to wear and what colors I love. But the daughter just says she's too old to have that kind of dress. Second, a waiter came to us and said they're full. What do you mean full? The table is free. So this woman discovers that there are no free tables for all women. They're just waiting for young women to come and sit down. Do they not want women over the age of 20 or 30 in their coffee shop? As I was standing there pondering these thoughts, two younger women walked by us and took the seats at the free table. And the third, I was swimming in a pool. Many people were around me, and among them were two boys. Two boys of the same age I was when I won my first medal in swimming. So she is a very good swimmer. Their laughter caught my attention. Look, the old hag is swimming. God, as if I was an liar. I felt ashamed doing what I love, something I should never be ashamed to do. So small daily life problems can cause great troubles in old persons who are just fragile, more fragile than they were before. And we do not have to under-evaluate this. Slide 24. Digital ageism is quite a new kind of discrimination. It means that if you are not a digital skilled person, you probably will not find a job. This kind of selection is quite often an age-related discrimination. Old people find it more challenging to carry out basically daily life tasks which do not consider their needs and exclude them. If the use of certain tech, like apps or even cells, is requested without any alternative, that is inherently ageist. And artificial intelligence is surely going to increase the gap. It's also prejudicial to think that old people are not able at all to learn how to use computers and even AI. It is another stereotype we should contrast. While even statistical inquiry often gives that for granted without really investigating the problem. But we can see that people in their 50s are twice as likely to remain unemployed or have to wait more after losing their jobs. Anyhow, we can also see that there is a digital spectrum. Ageism against old people can act in another way. It often orients mass communication studies which do not include their practices or see them as bad in a prejudicial way. Many studies show that old people, if motivated and given an opportunity, can learn well. Slide 25. Ageism can also be against young people. This is surprising. Young people cannot really participate to societal life with their full potentialities because some of the decisional processes are denied to them because of their age. Traditional workplaces, hierarchy, seniorities. Young people are said they have to wait for their time, and so they are obstacles in their active participation in societal life, and above all, from decisionality in workplaces and communities. Especially young women are victims of prejudices, also for their possible pregnancies. As it always happens, stigma and preclusions, because of prejudices, demotivate the victims, and a bad circle starts, which is very difficult to stop. And a perpetrator-victim cycle often takes place when young people grow older. If they have been victims of ageism, they can easily become the offenders. Young people can be seen as a marginalized and inferior group. And young women, in particular, are also requested to have high standard of beauty in some cases and are marginalized if they have not. In slide 26, we see bullyism. I wanted to dedicate one slide to this phenomenon because as teachers, we have to face this problem quite often, I think. Bullyism is an act of intimidating, harassing, or abusing someone often with a sense of power, with the aim of inflicting psychological or physical harm. And UNESCO data says that 1 in 3 students worldwide say they have been physically attacked at least once during the year. In some case, age can be the discriminating factor. It can cause humiliation and isolation, especially in workplaces. And very often, age acts as an intersectional factor. Recently, we have started to talk also about cyberbullying, which is bullying through digital communication instruments. It is very dangerous because it is uncontrollable, therefore. And it can be against all people, but also against young people. And in both cases, for elements connected with their age. For old people, cyberbullying is often connected with economic fraud. Intergenerational conflict often finds a stereotype expression on social media, with younger and older people frequently opposed to one another. And this is another stereotype we have to contrast. In slide 27, also for ageism against young people, I'm offering you some stories told by victims of discrimination. A 23-year-old young lady was marginalized in her workplace because she tried to express her competencies as well as possible, and because she wanted them to be recognized. Her manager, in order to prevent her to succeed in this, tried to make her feel incompetent. Finally, she felt she could do anything but leave her job. Young frequently are hindered and slowed down in their career. And this is bad, not only for them, of course, but also for society in general, because it prevents innovation and the use of fresh energies in all fields. How to contrast ageism? Increasing awareness is the first step to contrast any kind of marginalization. But in this case, it is particularly important because ageism is so little recognized as a kind of discrimination. Intergenerational solidarity. This is what we have to create and encourage. And the World Health Organization has outlined a frame of action to reduce ageism, which states how it is important that all subjects be involved. United Nations agency, governments, civil society associations, and private sectors. Slide 29, some example of intergenerational practices. They are the best way to contrast ageism, to help young and old people to find common interests and to participate in community activities together is of crucial importance. Intergenerational practice can also take place in schools, and it helps to develop friendships and smoothens tensions in the local society. 2 examples: courses in which students teach old people how to use basically cells, tablet, and PC. Young and old people build together an event, a conference, an exhibition, a creative activity. So participate together in the life of their community. In slide 30, you'll find a bibliography divided into 2 parts, one for education and one for ageism. Thank you. See you soon for the other units.